Okay, so this is the last part of the class. I want to talk a little bit about creativity. So this is an adapted presentation of a paper that I worked on with some colleagues, which was about creativity and leadership. So the question was, how do you lead creative people? But there's information about leadership and, team and creativity as well, team creativity. So let me ask you a question about your beliefs, right? Do you believe that does money enhance creativity? So if I pay you to be creative, if I pay you more, are you going to be more creative or less? Or does it matter? Does it not matter?
Do I work harder to try to be creative?
So I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
So if you get paid more money, you would feel like you have more of a responsibility, and instead of giving up at a certain point, you power on and like try to come up with even newer ideas.
So you think it might make you more creative?
Maybe.
Okay.
Some people.
I saw other people say, think not. Yes?
I think it won't. It would only in the sense that you'd have more resources to use.
Okay.
Like a bigger budget for whatever you're doing.
All right. So it could in that way. Does anybody think more money will make you less creative?
Yeah, I think if you have less money, then you're more likely to work harder to start making more money. Get a raise or bonus.
Okay. All right. Were you going to add something?
I think maybe you have, as a creative person, you have more pressure. You have more money, and creativity is like not possible with pressure. It's like something you have to do when you're free.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's something that happens quite often is people, artists, whether they be writers, movie directors, singers, poets, who become famous with one of their pieces, often experience tremendous block to their creativity right after that because of the pressure they have to do it again. That's a common phenomenon in the study of creativity. But I mean, essentially, so Teresa Amabile is a researcher at Harvard who's very known in the field of creativity, and she has done research on that in various settings. And what she has found was that essentially rewards like money, extrinsic rewards, diminish creativity. Whereas the intrinsic rewards of being creative, of working on a creative project, increase creativity. So there was extrinsic versus intrinsic. Extrinsic is something you do. Oh, sorry, you were going to answer. Well, so money is a typical extrinsic reward. You do something not because you like to do the thing itself, but because of what it gets you. So I might be willing to do a really boring job if I'm paid a lot of money, because with that money I can go on a vacation, which is what I really want to do. Right? Now, going on a vacation, now that's intrinsically interesting to me. Now, creativity, what's interesting with creative work, most creative workers tend to enjoy the work of being creative. There's some value for them in that, in and of itself. So if you pay a creative person to work on something that they're already motivated to work on, the side effect might be that they're going to be less motivated. They're going to be less creative. Sounds strange, right? So, example, the way Amabile tested that was take painters and look at paintings that they have painted of their own volition for fun, right? And paintings they have painted because they were hired to paint them by a rich patron. And take those paintings and give them to experts, art experts, and ask them to evaluate the creativity of each of those paintings. And on average, people find expert arts experts will find that the paintings that were painted by the artist without having sold the painting are judged to be more creative than the ones that were hired to paint, right? Does that make sense? But there were also experiments done with children. So children in preschool, you ask them to draw something or to do something creative, and in one case you tell them simply just be as creative as you can. And that's it. That's the instruction. In the other case, you tell them, be as creative as you can, and there will be a panel of judges that will decide who is the most creative, and those who are the most creative will win like $10 or like a bag of sweets. And you find that when you introduce that other condition, on average, the children are going to be less creative than in the first situation. Fascinating, right? Extrinsic creativity can, extrinsic motivation can decrease creativity, including money. So that kind of creates, a problem where, for managers, people in organization that are supposed to have creative people working for them, how do you manage them? How do you influence them? Imagine trying to manage Mozart, Einstein. Can any boss make them more creative? Right? Not really. It's kind of hard to manage creative people. You can think of creative people as cats. This was kind of the question that I was investigating with my co-authors, and we're not the only ones. There's a lot of people doing research on that. But essentially, in order to begin to answer this question, you want to look at the whole field of creativity. So there's a whole field in psychology that is interested in understanding what makes people creative. And it's a work in progress. We don't have the final answer. Creativity is still mysterious. But there are a few things we know. So we know that creativity depends on the personality of the person engaging in creative work. It depends on their process at the individual level, how they go about their task, right? It depends on their environments. There are a lot of things in your environment that can influence how creative you are or not. Think about when you had to write your self-reflection paper. You probably picked unconsciously or consciously a particular environment. Do you work better in a coffee shop? Do you work better in a small room? Do you work better in the morning or at night? What are the factors that influence your creativity? Right? When you have groups working together, so groups can be creative. Imagine a group of animators that are working at Pixar to make a movie. Right? But imagine in regular organizations that you're going to join, engineers working on a new product, managers working on devising a new strategy for the organization. Right? What are group aspects of creativity? So group composition, we've just talked about that now, influences creativity. The group process influences creativity. And if you look at an organization as a whole, think about companies like Google, Apple, IDEO. There are companies that have cracked a little bit the code of how can you as a company, as an organization, be creative. What are organizational factors that lead your organization to continue to be creative? Usually, it's hard to keep your mojo. Looking at Apple, it's going the way of Microsoft maybe, and Google, and Microsoft is now, who thinks of Microsoft as creative? But it was at some point. IBM at some point was creative. But there's still things that have to do with the organization that influence creativity. So let's go in each of those in more depth. So in terms of personality or person-centered factors, what has been found is that expertise tends to be required for you to be creative. So if you want to be a creative painter, you better have painted a lot of paintings before and know about the history of art and know about techniques for how to paint. Right? If you want to be a creative programmer, you need to have to pay your dues in programming and taken a lot of classes and programmed a lot of stuff and made a lot of mistakes and know a lot about programming. That is much more likely to make you creative. Hi, Shakti. So expertise is important. Intrinsic motivation for the task. So we've seen that being intrinsically motivated is a factor that enhances creativity. So when you care about something, when you take joy in doing something, when you're obsessed with something, let's say you're a photographer who loves to take, I have a friend who loves to take pictures of mountains and outdoor scenery, and he obsesses over that. He goes all around the US to take pictures of mountains and climb them and do crazy, crazy hikes to get the picture he wants. So intrinsic motivation for a particular task is more likely to make you creative. Closely related to that, once you become creative in a particular field, you tend to identify with the task, the creative task that you engage in. You tend to think of yourself as, I'm a writer, I'm a photographer, I'm a painter, and it defines me. So identity being bound up in the work being done is indicative of a creative person. There are scores that have been developed by psychologists, creative scales, that can indicate your creativity, and we have found that yes, they do indicate to some degree creativity. So having a high score on creative skills tends to, it doesn't cause creativity, but it's a way to measure creativity. Creative people tend to have perseverance. So that's, I have a lot of friends in creative fields, and I've done a lot of research on it, in particular in the film industry. You fail so many times, and for so many years you are dirt poor, failing. You read the story of any producer, director, actor who's made it in Hollywood, and they will all tell you they have failed for years and years. And at some point you have to ask yourself, am I crazy to keep doing this? And the ones who keep doing it are typically the ones who make it. Now, a lot of them still don't make it. So it's still like a huge gamble. But perseverance in the face of adversity, in the face of failure, in fact, there's a misconception that creative people are naturally gifted and they come up with the right solution right away. As Thomas Edison said, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And that's very, very true. So spending a lot of time refining your art, working really hard, failing, not making it, sucking at something, and still doing it. That's one of the secrets to being creative. Being a hard worker. Creative people are not lazy people. They work really hard at their craft. Taking initiative in a particular field. Not believing that everything has been found, discovered, not accepting that other people are better than you, not being happy with the status quo, right? That's related to being creative. Related to that being, that's why creative people are hard to manage, like cats. They tend to be independent. They don't care what their boss tells them. They don't care as much being given clear guidelines and goals. They don't like that. They tend to be independent. They tend to have courage. They tend to be curious. So those are all factors associated with personality.